meeting to order. First, we have approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes or additions to the agenda that we need to include? No? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Oh, thank you for getting it up on the screen. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Yes, this is Commissioner Mark. I make a motion to approve the agenda.
And do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Shea. I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
And I will do roll. 1 second. Ryan, could you resend Troy the link, please? He's trying to get in. So I apologize for that. All right. Commissioner Weaver.
Aye.
Commissioner Pint.
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius.
Aye.
Commissioner Shea.
Aye.
Commissioner Veerling.
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
And Commissioner Thiel. He's here. Done.
Okay, the motion is passed. Next, we'll move to the meeting minutes, which I believe were sent out. Did anyone have any suggested changes to the minutes, or do we have a motion to approve the minutes as sent to us?
Commissioner Pint, I move to approve the minutes as published.
Do we have a second?
Commissioner
Schmidt.
Okay, I will do roll. Commissioner Weaver.
Aye.
Commissioner Pint.
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius.
Aye.
Commissioner Shea.
Aye.
Commissioner Veerling.
Aye.
And Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, the motion has passed. Then I think we can move on to staff reports. Looks like we're starting with Troy. Or is he still trying to get on?
Checking right now, Madam.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, so Troy is not in the waiting room right now.
Okay.
I just resent him the link.
Do we want to move on to your updates, Vanessa? And then we can come back to Troy.
All right. And then if you could, I'm getting an echo of myself. So 1 minute. Okay. I'm going to share my screen here. Yes. Okay, if you could let me know when you're able to see my screen.
We can see it, or I can see it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we do have a kind of an upcoming issue that was just recently brought to staff's attention kind of later last week and more recently. The conversation has kind of resurfaced again between the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District and the Scott County WMO as to if there's any benefit to streamlining agencies, or if there is an opportunity to improve efficiencies between agencies. At this time, staff does not have a lot of information, but the staff was kind of instructed to invite the WPC to attend a board workshop regarding this issue next Tuesday from probably about 11 to 1 is when our board workshops typically are. What I can share with you now is a little bit of a one-pager of some of the thoughts that are being discussed by the county and Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District. Again, staff is just being brought up to speed on this issue right now. So obviously we have several concerns and several questions about this moving forward. We're certainly interested in knowing what the WPC's concerns are as well. But I'm just going to kind of walk through this document as we have it right now. So this isn't everything. Obviously, there's certainly many things that are not on this document right now, but this is kind of a one-pager summary of what the discussion is about and a little bit of why. What is it that we are trying to accomplish? So we're looking to provide the most efficient, cost-effective, and collaborative water resource management solution for the residents of Scott County. And one of the options might be to evaluate administrative and overhead costs in watershed management and identify opportunities to direct dollars to maybe more projects and practices on the ground to improve water quality even more than the current outcome, which is provided right now by 2 highly functioning implementing agencies. Another option might be to streamline watershed permitting towards a one-stop entity. I'll admit I'm a bit curious about this one since the WMO is not a permitting agency. I guess all I could assume from that is if we didn't have a watershed district, then obviously we wouldn't have additional redundant permitting. Understanding the advantages and disadvantages of combining agencies, resources, infrastructure, skill sets, and knowledge of the 2 agencies. So the options kind of that are being discussed right now are leaving things as they are, which is how we've been operating for some time. These are obviously both functioning WDs and WMOs in the county. Obviously, as the leader in watershed management in the county, the WMO has been highly successful and exceeded their goals and expectations for plan implementation, projects, and partnerships for well over 10 years. But we're certainly always willing to look at new ways to even exceed that further. Usually as a scientist, we don't say you should go above 100%, but we always still like to try. We do tend to do things for extra credit. We obviously support the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District's funding for several of their programs through SWCD, which is mostly funded by the WMO, as well as some of their other projects and programs. But we're always looking for new ways to improve efficiencies. But the other 2 options, in addition to just keeping things as they are and looking for even more opportunities to collaborate, would be either a countywide WMO. So the WMO would expand its boundaries to include the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District. And then the alternative could be to expand the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District's boundaries to include the WMO. So obviously this isn't quite county-wide, obviously, because there's 5 watershed management organizations in the county. This would only be the combining of those 2. So it's, the WMO has obviously a much larger land area than the WD, but those are kind of the different options on the table right now. So this is not a conversation about Lower Minnesota River Watershed District, Vermilion JPO, or Black Dog. So all options do require Bowser approval. So staff has reached out to the Board of Water and Soil Resources, as well as the counties, a couple of our directors, and at least one of our commissioners. So through those conversations, Bowser has inquired what exactly are the actions the agencies have already taken to resolve these kinds of concerns about maybe merging or unifying, or where exactly the opportunities might lie for improving efficiencies. They're not quite clear what that is and what we've already done. Obviously, they'd like to know what we've done first already. Another piece is that any option that, other than keeping things as they are, would require consents from all of the 8 cities and 10 townships that are affected. So, and that could fall under either 103B .221 or 103B .215. One would be terminating a district and expanding the other, and then vice versa, a boundary expansion. But under subpart 2 of both, it requires a petition filed jointly by the governing bodies of all statutory and home rule charter cities and towns having jurisdiction over territory within the watershed. So obviously, staff's initial questions are, well, then what are the concerns and questions of our LGUs that would be impacted by this? What are the technical concerns or difficulties or challenges that might be faced with a unified agency of any type? And is it even possible to get all 20 some odd agencies on board when obviously those within the WMO already have a very high functioning agency, and we have a very high rating from our residents as to their satisfaction of the agency. So I'm not sure if they're going to understand what the benefit is for them. Nonetheless, we're still going to look into this. So option A, again, as I said, is expand the WMO to include the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District. It could be either an arm of the county government, or it could be an arm of the county government with a separate board. Again, staff's not quite sure what the benefit is of creating a separate board, but that's one of the options. Option B would be obviously expand and rename the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District into a new countywide watershed district and continue operating as a separate unit of government. And then obviously option 3 is to continue to strengthening the partnership. One of those options we're actually pursuing with the One Watershed, One Plan, which we'll be bringing to you later in the meeting. So some of the things that have been brought up as possible concerns or possible things to look into when looking into this is levy authority. So option A, the county board would no longer serve as the governing board if we made the SWMO a larger agency and appointed a separate WMO board. It would probably be a member of the JPA, but not the only member of the JPA. But it would still, as a member, retain some oversight of the annual budget, the CIP, and levy amount. So they're still directly answerable to the voters, and the voters have direct input as to the budget and levy of the WMO, as well as our LGUs, which I know is often very important. Option B, the county board obviously would appoint a separate district board as they normally do for watershed districts. The annual budget, the CIP, and levy amount are set without board oversight. Most of you are familiar with the fact that watershed districts have no oversight in that regard. They are autonomous. And one of the other issues is, of course, district levies tend to be higher than the WMO levies. And this is actually true of watershed districts throughout the metro. It doesn't have anything to do with the capacity to levy. We are both special taxing districts. It's just, how we receive our input into our levies. So for example, the tax impact for median home value. This is something we do every year. You'll notice in 2021, the SWMO's levy was $37.64. The Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District was 115. We're just gonna round. 2020, obviously we're very similar again at 37. Prior Lake Spring Lake was at 120. So you can kind of see going back the difference in those budgets and levies. The interesting piece is that the differences in the tax do not impact the effectiveness of either agency. They are not able to do, they haven't been at least able to do more than the WMO, nor has the WMO done less, even though we are taxed less. Obviously, again, too, though, with option C, there'd be no change. Administration and staffing. So all options obviously could continue to utilize the county offices or Prior Lake Spring Lake does a wonderful job of working out of the Prior Lake city offices. So through option A, expanding the WMO, we could continue to do that through the county, even if we were a separate agency. Option B, administration, accounting, legal could be contracted from the county with a district-wide watershed, with a larger watershed district. However, they have always had that option. We offer it every year, including this past year, but they have not taken up that option in 50 years. So I guess staff is not sure what would change under that new option. Planning. Well, both options A and B would require a new comprehensive watershed management plan to encompass all the new water resources under that new agency. Options A and B would require probably new rules and new standards, which would impact all of the LGUs, all of the cities that are MS4s. They would have to write new plans and update all of their plans, which is very time consuming. And it's a kind of a costly effort to have these plans written. That's why we only do them every 10 years. Then there's the regulatory and permitting. We've kind of started to touch on that in this area. As you are all aware, the WMO and WMOs are non-permitting agencies. We have standards, and those standards are incorporated by our LGUs, but we do not permit. We already have what's kind of a one-stop watershed kind of permitting thing because we don't permit. So LGUs don't come to the WMO for permitting. They just go directly to that city or township or county, who's ever implementing those zoning rules. That's just the nature of our agency, is one stop. Option B, watershed districts are permitting agencies. They are permitting agencies under statute. So it is one of the things that is written for them under statute. A couple of key points under there, all public projects, so city and township projects, must be permitted through the watershed district, regardless of whether or not they have an MOU. So right now, if you're Blakely Township or the city of Belle Plaine and you need to do a road reconstruction project, you don't go to the WMO for a separate review and permit. If you were in a watershed district, you would have to go to the watershed district for a separate review and permit in addition to everything you already do. The benefits obviously are that it gets additional review. Maybe that's got another pair of eyes on it. Obviously the offset might be it takes more time. There's obviously more cost. And you may not directly see if there's any, what that might result in. So another key point is that LGUs may be allowed to administer some, but not all, of watershed district rules. So it's not as if watershed districts require permitting for everything. They only require it for some of their rules. And you can have an MOU with a watershed district in order to kind of help streamline a little bit of that. However, there's just no such thing as a one-stop shop under a watershed district. And there's generally going to be an additional cost either way, simply because district rules are complex and time-consuming to review and permit. LGUs must commit additional staff time to ensure applications meet the district requirements by adding staff or hiring a consultant. Applicants do often struggle with district rules by and it creates kind of rather frequent time-consuming customer service issues. And then any variance from the rules still requires a separate applicant to go to the district for approval. And the district does have the authority to review any application and permit separately at their discretion at any time. So oftentimes, while you can do a one-stop shop under a watershed district, a lot of agencies don't have the capacity or able to do the additional staff capacity and just simply say, you know what, you guys just take that back. The unfortunate downside of that is what we call dual permitting. You now have to have 2 permits, 2 securities for the same project that you would not have to have under a WMO. This is just kind of a one-page summary. Obviously, there are many other potential issues and concerns, especially staff is interested in what the SWCD thoughts are on these different areas. We're interested in what some of the technical and water resource impacts might be to this type of thing. Right now, this is very administrative, but not resource based. What is the impact to the resources? We don't know. But the board is, again, just starting to kind of look into this. There's going to be a workshop on the 2nd of March. So we'd very much like you to attend if you were able. We realize it's the middle of the day, and just kind of share and voice your concerns at that time. And then at this point, I would stand for any questions.
Okay, this is Virgil. Thanks for getting us up to speed as much as you could, considering the overwhelming nature of this amount of information. And yeah, this is a lot for us to even start to digest. So first of all, before I forget, I definitely will be there on March 2nd. What time? I'm assuming it's at the courthouse. I mean, at the council chambers over there, the courthouse.
I will confirm. Typically, though, there is a Zoom option, a web option to attend as well.
Oh,
But
good.
confirm that I will admit I have not attended a board workshop yet under the pandemic. The last time I did, it was non-pandemic. So
That'd be great. Let us know what our options are. That'd be great. So,
absolutely.
yeah, the other question I have initially right away is that our two organizations are so different. First of all, like I said, we're not a permitting agent, and they are. We are not the governing board. The county commissioners service that role, whereas Prior Lake, they are their own board. Their taxing authority is like a little over 3 times as what ours is in terms of the cost to their residents versus ours. They primarily deal with just the 2 lakes. I mean, quite frankly, that's what their whole budget's about, and what what they spend their money on is, the quality of the 2 lakes, which is very admirable. But I'm not sure how that relates as much to our larger perspective, what we're trying to do. So I guess I'd be kind of interested as to sort of where's this coming from? Is it coming from our customer base? In other words, our LGUs expressing some concern? I doubt it's coming from a taxing perspective, because obviously we're pretty cost effective at that. Is it coming from the fact that the county maybe doesn't want to be the management organization for the WMO anymore? Or is it that they somehow want to offload this to Prior Lake? Or is it the other way around, that Prior Lake doesn't want to do it and they want to offload it? It'd be kind of interesting to find out sort of, where, because it can't just be a cost saving issue. It's got to be more than that. So those would be my initial concerns. Yeah.
I have a question too. I understand that this has been tried before. So I'm wondering if any of the other commissioners were around the last time, or staff, when this was tried before, because I know there's been a couple investigations, I guess you could say, into whether or not this would be a cost savings, and it's come back that it hasn't been. So was anybody around during those previous discussions?
No, I
Madam Chair.
haven't been.
Go ahead, Virgil.
No, I said I haven't been. I said on one of the initial boards right away when we set up everything from our end after the Credit River, et cetera, dissolved. But no, I haven't been involved in any discussions in terms of working with Prior Lake.
Madam Chair, I was around at the time, but Paul pretty much had the discussions, with other departments about it. He didn't really involve us a lot. He kind of protected us from it. And then the study was done, hiring a third party to determine what maybe the benefits were or not. So I can't speak to a lot of background on it, besides the fact that it kind of went on, and Paul kept us kind of protected from it.
This is Virgil again. So if the study was done, where is a copy of that study that we can take a look at? Does anybody know?
I do. I have a copy of it. I can send it out. Absolutely.
If you make that available, that'd be great. Be interested also. I don't know what Paul is. Paul came from like Spring Lake. We hired him, so he'd have a better insight probably.
Otherwise, I'll just be echoing some of Virgil's concerns, or excuse me, Commissioner Penn's concerns. You look at the tax rate differences, and if we were to be encompassed by, Prior Lake, Spring Lake, I would be very concerned that the taxes would jump up in the entire county. And also with the cost of projects in that watershed district, I just think there would be a shift in the work that we could do. I mean, the project types that we do are just so different. I just can't see benefit yet. So I have some concerns about that. I will attend on Tuesday, so I'll just need, I don't know how we can get that login information or if it's available online, but if somebody can send that to me, I'll be on that call or go to the courthouse if I need to.
Yeah, I don't have it right now, but I will definitely get it to you.
And I think it would be useful to start talking to some of the communities and finding what they think. Because if it's required, as you mentioned, Vanessa, that all townships and all the communities need to sign on for this, that discussion can get started, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Can we start an evaluation on, whether or not they think it's a good idea? Because if they don't, then we don't need to worry about it as much.
That's a great recommendation, Madam Chair. You certainly direct staff to assemble a TAC, a Technical Advisory Committee. The WMO does have a technical advisory committee that full in these situations. It's a technical representative from our WMO LGUs to help provide input and again, answer some of those technical questions and raise some of those technical concerns from their perspective. So yeah, we could probably pull one together and present at the next WPC meeting if you would like.
I think that would be an excellent way to move forward. If I welcome other commissioners to speak up if you have other thoughts or suggestions on that.
I think it's an excellent point. I'd like to see if staff could work on that and get us some information by the time of our next meeting. So thank you.
And this is Commissioner Casilius. I just want to say that I will try to attend on this next Tuesday as well. I can't attend all of it, but I'll do what I can. I have some afternoon commitments, but also want to kind of, echo the same sentiments that have already been expressed with regards to the taxes. And certainly I'm concerned that the scope of what the other watershed district does versus the county one, it feels like to me the effort should be handled at the county level for more global planning. So I think, that would be a big concern of mine.
Chair Weaver, this is Troy. When it's appropriate, I do have a comment or a question.
Yes, certainly.
Sure. So I kind of just hearing this as well. Obviously, the Soil and Water District has, I guess, not necessarily concerned because we support looking at ways to improve efficiency. That's not, it's more or less we're a stakeholder that could be impacted greatly by the direction this heads. We have a 70-year track record of working with the county. In the last 17 years, we've worked through this pseudo private service arrangement with the WMO and the Prior Lake, Spring Lake, and other entities throughout the county to provide a source of our work in our budget. The county, though, by and large, has been the largest contributor. 75 to 80% of our budget, if you will, does come through that partnership. So any impact to that or threat to that is really have a big impact on the soil and water and what we do. I didn't see anything in that write-up about soil and water involvement, yet we're doing all the work on the ground, practically speaking. And I think to sort of exclude the soil and water from that, or continue to exclude the soil and water from that would be a mistake. As far as the options presented, I think they're all viable. I have heard in the past about watershed districts, and Commissioner Pint and others have expressed this a bit already, in that they have a bit of a different charge. One of the big, if you will, concerns about them is they're an appointed board with a taxing and regulatory authority. And in most cases, you see township cities don't necessarily aren't in favor, or let's say the citizens at large having an unelected board, you know, being a taxing authority, getting to that tax issue. And then also the regulatory authority, they're authorized those authorities under state statute. So the county wouldn't have that, like they're like delegating that authority away from themselves. So I'd be, I mean, it's certainly a viable option, but that's something that would have to be discussed and understood, you know, what are the ramifications of that sort of thing moving forward.
That is a good point, Troy. As far as where authorities lie, a watershed district does have authority over the county with regards to that regulatory aspect and its rules and area. So that is very different than a WMO. So.
And thanks, Troy. I was actually curious about how that might affect the SWCD, so I'm glad you jumped in. Is there a way to have the SWCD voice on the TAC? Like, can they be included as someone to give some feedback into this? So I see you nodding, Vanessa.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Again, it is just a technical panel of technical professionals from our LGU. So it's usually the staff, like the staff water resource scientist or the staff water resource manager. And it does include county partners as well as the SWCD. That's what's written under the policies of the WMO. So absolutely. And that's good because, again, the SWCD provides a lot of that technical input as to how we actually implement a lot of our resource management and resource production or protections. And so it's a really important voice to have at that kind of table.
Great, thanks.
Madam Chair, I just want to add one more item if I could, just for clarification. This has come up. I was around when it originally came up, probably 7 to 8 years ago, I want to say, maybe. I don't have my numbers exact straight. You know, there's pros and cons on both sides of this thing that were at that time. I don't think those metrics have changed. You can make the current system work, and you can make a new system work perfectly fine. You don't have to switch everything around, or you could switch around and have the same impact. What really matters is how diligent the people are in implementing it and wanting it to work. And I think that was sort of the takeaway I got from that first study, is that, you know, the Prior Lake Spring Lake is doing a good job. The county's doing a good job. There's very minimal to be gained, even monetarily, much less organizationally, for the merger. And again, I'm not saying that that's not a good direction or possibility. It's just at that time, they didn't find a whole lot of value added to going through all that change. And the other thing I just want to say is that we've worked well with all our partners locally. I think Prior Lake has done an outstanding job, and they are high functioning. And they do have a focus being the lakes, and they do a damn good job at it. And we're happy to be part of that work, same way as the WMO. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to offer right now.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I don't want to suggest that the Prior Lake Spring Lake isn't well organized or that they aren't doing what they should do. I just think our project types are so different that it could end up being a fight over money. And it's
that would
hard.
be unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the way that it's set up now is working really well. So, but I think at this point, I mean, you're just looking to inform us, right? And any feedback that we have, but we ideally will wait and hear what the TAC says. And then at that point, would we make some kind of recommendation to the WMO board? Or where does our voice come in next?
That's a really good question, Madam Chair. At the moment, the next place for your voice or your questions or thoughts or concerns would possibly be at the board workshop.
Yep.
But yes, after that, once the staff is reported back from about the TAC at the next WPC meeting, if you feel it's necessary to make a recommendation at that point in time, you're certainly more than welcome to at
Okay.
the March meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I see Bruce Loney is on. He's from Prior Lake, Spring Lake, and I'm not sure to what extent he's aware or knowledgeable about the progress that's gone on, but maybe he could add some insight that we haven't heard yet.
Okay, Bruce, do you have any thoughts to add? If you're talking, you're on mute. And if we can't hear you, if you want to put anything in the chat too, we can monitor that. Any other comments from the other commissioners? Questions for Vanessa or the staff?
Now, this is Commissioner Pant again. No, the only thing I would be interested is, Bruce, if you could unmute and just give us a little, at least a comment as to kind of your initial thoughts without making any, major statements. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks, Bruce.
All right, well, I'm not hearing anything. Again, I'll just leave it as Bruce, if you want to unmute, go ahead and do so, or like I said, the chat, we can monitor that if you want to put anything in there, but I don't want to put you on the spot anymore, I don't think.
Chairman Weaver, this is Commissioner Pant again. Just to put information, I have been kind of following along with what Prior Lake, Spring Lake has been doing, and I haven't gone back too far, but for at least the last several months, there has not been any discussion on their side at all about this issue.
Okay.
There's zero, absolute zero over the last several months. So this might be a surprise to them too, or it's something that at least has not come up for any type of input yet. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that information.
Yep.
That's good to know. Okay, last call from any comments or questions from anyone. Otherwise, Vanessa, if you have additional updates.
That was really that was enough. That was a large update, and I appreciate your time. We can go ahead and move on, Madam Chair, to the SWCD update. And thank you again for your feedback, and staff will move forward with that direction.
All right, thank you. Troy, we're going to jump back to you, I think.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I'll just highlight a few items from the report that appears in your packet for February. You'll see the chart on top shows the number of requests for conservation assistance. So we're still hovering around 225 active ones. About 125 of those, so about a half or better, are actual projects that are in various stages of planning, implementation, or payment. And of those 125, about 100 of them are associated with the Scott WMO. Soil health and cover crop, we continue to implement that strategic plan. We just provided some updates for the plan for 2021. We look at it every year to make sure we know what our accomplishments were, and we extrapolate out of that plan the types of activities we're going to do for the coming year. So that'll be, we just actually met and identified what those specific activities are be for 21, and we'll present that at the next meeting for you all. And finally, we're looking for the different ideas on how to do more virtual and stop-by-stop cover crop tours rather than having groups get together, try to convene at the same time, which proves difficult logistically, especially nowadays. If we can get some way for that to be out there and individual farmers, producers to be able to do their own touring and stops, we think that would be a good direction to go. Clean water education, a big thing there is we launched the chloride grant. That's working with the WMO and and putting a grant application out there for businesses and organizations, including cities and others, to reduce salt use. I think mainly for changing out equipment. We completed our 2020 annual report. I'm not sure if the WPC has received a copy, but I'll make sure I get a final report for 2020 to Vanessa so she can share it with everybody. And we're putting the final touches on our 2021 work plan. Inventory and assessments. So we completed our Thole Lake subwatershed assessment. So we have a list of priority projects, practices, and locations in the Thole Lake watershed for BMPs. And we've updated the Cleary Lake one with current modeling, using current modeling. So we have two current subwatershed assessments to help guide work in high value waters in the WMO. And now we're working, continuously working on the Roberts Creek watershed. I'll skip through zoning and livestock support unless there's questions at the end for that. Water quality, obviously, we're kind of in a down mode right now and just preparing plans for the coming year as relates to water quality monitoring and flow measurement, things like that. The rainfall, this is just kind of a FYI. You can see kind of over the last 13 months, kind of where we stand with precipitation. This is comparing actual readings with historic averages at the Jordan office. January, we're about average, maybe a little bit below in terms of total precipitation. And for that, we do convert the snowfall into a rainfall equivalent or liquid equivalent, if you will. Plan reviews, we've seen a slight uptick in number of plans for January, which is kind of good news, I guess, for the economy and the building industry. So that's kind of rebounded a little bit. We see that kind of go up and down, you know, through the course of the year, as you can see from the graph there. Buffer law, we don't have any activity. We had two landowners, one in Prior Lake, one in the Scott WMO, that had questionable compliance status, but we reached out to both, and both are in touch with us wanting to get things back in order. It was really inadvertent in terms of the loss of some of the buffer that was there. So we're working with them. Tree program, I think I reported this last month, but the record sales continue. We've had over 200 orders, 20,000 trees. So we're well over half our sale, and we're not even halfway into the sale period. So we're pretty sure we're going to run out of all our trees. We're already ran out of a couple of species. The demand out there is just really pent up, and we're not sure what explains that. I guess talking to our vendors, they're sold out statewide and even beyond that. So there's just a high demand at this time. Cooperative weed management, we closed out our 2019 grant. We're looking for a 2021 grant for $5,000. We haven't heard on that yet, but one of the things you'll see in the upcoming scene paper is an article about the success we've had with cooperative weed program, primarily being the ability to identify and map where all our invasives are, and also we've had a good deal of success. Actually, it's a good success story in terms of keeping wild parsnip in check in the county. It was really starting to get away from us, and it's not a good weed to have either in our parks or waterways or anywhere really. And we've really been able to get a handle on it by jumping on it early in Scott County. Well, in Conservation Act, not a whole lot of activity being this time of year. Equipment rental, I'm just presenting this again for 2020. You can see that we had just about as much use as we did in the prior year, in 19, and that was a record year for us as well. So we'd like to see that. The more that equipment is out there, the more conservation is going on the ground. Last but not least, just sharing the final page here of the report, our new applications. We had 5 new applications with 4 landowners. Justine Hagnes, Tree Shrub Establishment, Tom Kloss, Conservation Cover. Glenn Newberg has 2 projects, one being a water and sediment basin, the other is Conservation Cover, and then a small project with the City of Savage. payments we paid out on 3 projects, including Ken Gozinski's Grass Waterway, Tim O'Loughlin's Cover Crops, and Mike and Diane Seifert Cover Crops. All the ones that are asterisks there, those have fact sheets attached to the bottom, so I'll let you look at them at your leisure. With that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
I do have a question, Troy, about the tax program. I know last year we had a wait list actually of applicants because of how successful we are as a partnership in getting those in the ground. Do we have a wait list yet this year, or how is it kind of looking for applications so far?
Yes, Madam Chair. Vanessa, that's a good question. We have a significant amount of new funding sources that we're working with this year. They actually came online last year, or some of that cost share funding came online last year, and we're soon to get 2 new additional funding sources from the WMO, one being the EPA funds and the other is the 2021 WBIF funds. And so I don't anticipate we'll have a waiting list, but we are implementing a batching and ranking system, meaning that we don't bring things to the board on a first come, first served basis any longer. Starting last year, now continuing this year, is we are batching all the applications we get and then being diligent and thoughtful about which ones we actually want to move forward based on the priorities we have and the grant funding sources. We have probably 20 different options of funding sources, to be honest with you, with the different grants and different sub-grants within those grants. It can be really complicated. So it's not that we have a backlog necessarily of demand, it's just that we have to be careful and we have to be thoughtful about how we fund these. So we kind of bunch them up and push them out as some sort of priority system.
Yep, I know it's a lot of work, the ranking and batching, but it's also really effective. So I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you on that. It's nice to see all those grants get used fully and making sure that we're able to do it that way. So yeah, that's part of that complexity. But it's a really nice thing to be able to see. So
yeah, I agree.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Troy? All right, thanks, Troy. I think we can move on to ongoing business and Ryan's project updates.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for the time. I don't have very many updates for this meeting. So as Troy just indicated, their tree sales are going really well. And one of our riparian buffer projects was in need of additional shrubs that needed to be planted back in it. And it was due to a herbicide carryover issue that we had previously. And so seeing as how fast their trees and shrubs were selling, I made sure to get our order in. So we were able to buy 200 replacement trees for that buffer, and they will arrive on April 30th. And the plan is to then install them that same day. Also, the permits for our phase 1 maintenance projects, we received permission from the DNR to go ahead with maintenance. Then also the Army Corps of Engineers acknowledged that we submitted an amendment to our previous permit. And so hopefully we'll hear back in short order from them and get the go ahead to do the project. So if we're not able to complete it here in the winter, there should be ample time either in summer when flows in the stream are lower, or fall, or the early part of winter, I guess the later part of this year. And then finally, our EPA grant is coming to an end. So as Troy and Vanessa were talking about our ranking and batching, we're making sure that as projects are being completed that are using those funds, if there is any slippage where they would come in under the encumbered amount, we're trying to then move quickly to re-encumber those dollars and put them towards additional projects. And so far we've been pretty successful. So as we're closing out that grant, we'll continue to monitor those projects, ensure that we are hitting our goals that we set forth in the grant, and then also trying to utilize those grant dollars to the full extent as well. And with that, I'll stand for any questions that anybody has.
Madam Chair, I might just clarify, the one EPA grant that Ryan is talking about is actually different than the 9 Elements EPA grant, which we just received. That's the 9 Elements grant, which we are just implementing this year, is the one where the WMO is one of only 10 agencies in the state to have received this grant, and one of only a very few agencies in the US to have received one of these EPA. So we apologize, we call a lot EPA grants. We have a few different ones, but we're ending one and starting one.
Thanks, Vanessa and Ryan. Any questions, any follow-up questions? Okay, I think we can move on to Melissa's program updates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I attended the 2021 SWEP annual meeting and had a great turnout of our program partners. A lot of ideas and input came from the partners on what they'd like to see in 2021 with the SWEP programming. Just really quickly, the tentative focus, again, hasn't changed since 2020. So the 3 different audiences that the program would focus on is first agricultural and rural landowners, with soil health and regenerative agriculture as a focus and promotion, groundwater protection and nutrient management for that audience. The second audience would be community groups, schools, and government, with recycling education, youth education expansion, chloride reduction via relationships with like maintenance professionals, similar to the grant program that Troy mentioned that we're working on right now. And then the third audience would be urban and lakeshore residents. So homeowner salt reduction via water softener alternatives. It's not something that we've really touched on yet. And proper winter salting, promotion of residential pollinator plantings, and then stormwater runoff responsibility for those kinds of areas. So secondly, the AIS program, the DNR announced its AIS control grant. Application period is now open. It's a little bit different this year. It's not a first come, first serve application process as in the past. They're giving 11 days to submit an application, so everybody has time to get something in. So the deadline is March 1st. They indicate that applications that come in will be randomly ordered and selected by this order until all funds are spent. That's how they worded it. So not quite sure how that's going to work, but I guess we'll find out. There's $400,000 available statewide. And so curly leaf is one of the aquatic invasive species eligible. So that's what we'd be applying for Cedar, McMahon, O'Dowd, and Thole Lakes. The other change that they made is that the person that applies is also has to be the person that's authorized to sign agreements. So Vanessa actually has to apply. So we're going to set up a meeting and I'll walk her through that. So that's another change from in the past. I usually was able to do it and then Paul would just sign the agreement, but they're changing their process a little bit here. And then no grant will exceed $5,000. So the most we could get for each lake is $5,000. So we'll get that put in this week and we'll see what happens. The last thing I have is I did get a request from Thole Lake on possibly preparing a lake vegetation management plan. So I'm going to look into the last survey that I did in 2020. I haven't had time to input that data and create maps. So I'm going to work on that this week. And I'm going to double check the RAPS study, the Watershed Restoration and Protection Strategy study that was done almost 2 years ago now, on the results of Thole Lake in that study, and then kind of put all the data together, determine what that says on what would be a good management direction for the lake. And so, so that's all I have at the moment. I'll stand for any questions if anybody has any.
I'd actually, again, like to add just a couple of pieces to that, because some of these things are newer to me as well. One of the things I learned in the SWEP annual report and annual meeting was not just that they were really, really successful, because they very much are, but it was really nice to see how well that the SWMO programs are able to be implemented through that partnership. I'm not sure if everybody pays that much attention to education, but I certainly do. The WMO contributes about $90,000 of the $100,000 budget, and we make sure that that's available countywide. So it's just another area where the WMO leads the whole county, because we really believe that coordinated watershed management is something that is best for everybody. So I was really proud that the WMO is able to do this and provide funding and resources and programs. And you'll actually see the videos and the chloride grants on the websites and the web pages of our other watershed partners. So it's another area where I was really proud to see how the WMO was able to lead watershed management in the county. So we really take that to heart, and that's nice to see. Thank you for all that hard work, Melissa. And Shelby, who's not here, but you know.
The SWEP acronym is not coming to me.
Scott County Watershed Education Partnership.
Okay, thank you.
It's actually Scott Clean Water.
Oh, that's right. Yep. Sorry. I still think Adam Sandler movies when I hear that. SWEP.
Okay, and then my other question was, so this AIS grant, that's interesting how that is going to be selected. Is there a concern we might not get any money on that? Do we know if that usually runs out?
It always runs out, yes. And I mean, we have the money budgeted, but it's always nice to get a little help. You know, in the past, we were very successful in the past at getting the grant. And then they stopped offering it because they didn't have enough money. And so it just came back last year. So I think it was gone for 2 years, I think. They offered it last year, but I was on medical leave and didn't apply in time. And now this year they kind of changed the selection process, which it makes it a little bit more fair. So people have time to get an application in and get randomly selected, I guess. So we'll
Okay.
And Madam Chair, we would still continue to offer AIS funds to all of our partners with or without this grant. We do budget and receive other additional funds to make sure that AIS can be implemented countywide. So it's unlikely that the WMO or any of our partners would see too much of an impact if we weren't able to get this one. We would still continue to make sure that we can help everybody regardless.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Other questions from Melissa? Okay, Melissa, it looks like you're up next on the outlet update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a lot of notes here, so I'm going to be reading from my notes because it's kind of a long story. So as you know, we were awarded $600,000 in the bonding bill last fall, and it's taken a few months of discussions at the administrative level because there was a concern with the requirements of the bonding appropriation as far as ownership of the infrastructure that's built with the state appropriation funds. because this outlet would be built with those funds, the Office of Minnesota Management and Budget in the legislature would require the WMO to own the outlet structure and the outlet channel for at least 125% of the useful life of the infrastructure. So useful life is defined as an engineer's estimate of depreciation of fixed assets, such as buildings, vehicles, equipment, and infrastructure. So the useful life of the outlet and the outlet channel would be determined when engineering and design is done on the outlet structure. The grant was specifically allocated to the county, and instead of seeking legislation to change the grantee to the WMO will manage the project for the county. But the many discussions that have been happening is that it's not Scott County's intent to permanently own and manage the outlet structure. But last week at the county board meeting, the county did approve entering into the grant agreement with the DNR and Minnesota Management and Budget in order to receive the funds. So with receiving the funds, there needs to be a legal entity established before we could proceed with any transfer of ownership of the outlet, because the county doesn't want to be the owner of it. That was the issue. So it would be the county's desire to turn over the outlet to like a McMahon Lake Improvement District once the 2-year project is completed, although that Lake Improvement District is not established yet. It's our understanding that the county has statutory powers to set up a Lake Improvement District, and the plan is to proceed with that process. So a transfer of the project could be made to the Lake Improvement District at an appropriate time. But in order to do that, new legislation would have to be introduced to the legislature. So Claire Roebling, who's the Scott County Legislative Liaison, has already updated Senator Pratt, who really championed this money to get this outlet constructed, and Representative Albright with all this information that we would have to introduce legislation in order to transfer ownership. So they're aware now of what request would be coming their way eventually. But the county wouldn't be seeking to do that yet because it's kind of premature, since there needs to be a legal entity established before we could proceed with any transfer. So the LID would need to be established and set up. So since the county board did approve entering into the agreement with that request for board action and resolution, we also included 2 attachments that the DNR asked for, which is a timeline of all the different tasks for the project and when those would be done, and also a budget of every task and where the source of funds is coming from for each of those tasks. So the next step for me is to send that board resolution and those supporting documents that DNR requested to Pat Lynch at the DNR, who will review them, send them to the state, and then we should be receiving the actual agreement for signature. With that,
Yeah, it's just it is a quirky one. I'll add, this is not like a normal grant agreement where you're awarded funds, your board approves a resolution, and you get a grant agreement and you get the funds. This one has an extra step, which is you're awarded the funds. Your board has to approve applying for those funds that you were awarded. And then the DNR will evaluate your application to see how much of the funds that you were awarded you will receive. And then they will write the grant agreement and send it to the applicant. The county just kind of cut to the chase and just put both of those into the same resolution. So it's nice. We don't have to go back to the county again. And it's also not unheard of it's actually quite common for watershed management organizations and counties to leverage the installation of large capital projects or larger water resource projects and then turn them over to the local authorities. Oftentimes we generally try to promote local stewardship and local management of water resources as much as possible. So that's always kind of been the goal of the WMO as well as the county. It was just a little bit surprising to hear that with this at least particular funding source, there may be additional steps involved with that. So normally you would just write that into the agreement. So it just took a little bit more time with the unique funding, but also, you know, we were told several times by the DNR that this is an extremely rare award. I think Pat Lynch said he'd not even heard of 5 times in his entire career, he's been around for a long time, of an agency being awarded this type of grant for this type of project. So all the hard work of the residents, all the hard work of the WMO and the county and the township and the partnerships really coming to fruition. It just takes a little bit of time and it's got a few hiccups, but we're doing quite well. So.
All right, thanks for that update. Any other questions for Melissa or Vanessa? Okay, I think we can move on to new business, One Watershed, One Plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was the one thing I knew we were going to talk about today. So it's nice to come back. Ironically, the One Watershed, One Plan planning process is something the WMO has gotten involved in specifically because we believe very strongly in unified watershed management in the county and really want to lead that endeavor. One Watershed, One Plan kind of epitomizes that process. And so we started with this back, it's been almost a year now with some of our partners to kind of investigate what that looks like. So after meeting with the kind of the planning committee for our planning group, it's about time for us to kind of come back to the WPC and the board and start getting a little bit more official approval and official direction as to who might be involved in this process and this program and how the WMO and the county. So ironically, this is also one where both the county and the WMO have a spot at the table. Now, obviously we're wearing 2 hats and streamlining that by just having one at the table. But there are certain aspects moving forward now where we'll need to have a board resolution as well as a either a WPC commissioner or a board commissioner sit on one of their policy committees to help provide oversight and direction for the planning area. So for those of you who are not familiar with the exciting new world of One Watershed, One Planning, we have a nice, now Rita's smiling over there. We have a nice little video because Bowser actually does a great job of putting together videos. I'm gonna have Ryan play it. It's only about 5 minutes, won't take up too much of your time, but rather than listen to me talk for 5 minutes, I'm just gonna let Bowser do that part. And then I will catch you up to speed with our local planning area after that.
And Chair, Commissioners, can you see the screen with the One Watershed, One Plan? Just want to make sure.
Not yet. It flashed for a second, but then it went away.
Okay, give me 1 second.
There it is. Got it.
You have to unmute yourself, Rye.
Chair, Commissioners, we'll start this over again. So now it should work.
Welcome to part of the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources One Watershed, One Plan program video series. In this module, we will expand on the 3 big ideas introduced in the What is One Watershed, One Plan module. This program is about developing local plans that address the needs of natural resources and the values and priorities of the participating government partners. Its foundation is in 3 big ideas that are transforming how we manage water in Minnesota. I'll talk briefly about each of these in this introductory presentation. The first big idea is working together. One plan is built on the idea that the health of our waters is directly connected to what happens on land. Minnesota's cleanest waters are in areas where forests and grasslands are intact. On the other hand, more intensive land use increases runoff and associated pollution, as well as concerns about groundwater sustainability. These problems directly affect quality of life concerns local governments deal with on a daily basis. For example, counties deal with public health, public safety, transportation, drainage, protecting property values, and many other water-related matters. Keeping in mind that land-water connection, looking at the solutions volume and land, not in water. Zoning, regulations, and even land management programs are important tools for counties. Much of the land in Minnesota is privately owned, so restoration and protection also happens by working with private landowners who voluntarily participate in conservation programs or do land management on their own. That's the strength of soil and water conservation districts, who provide technical and financial help to property owners. This help not only solves a problem or creates an opportunity for property owners, but it is also one of the best ways to solve water issues downstream. Watershed districts, where they exist in Minnesota, manage drainage and water levels, regulate certain activities, work with partners to build large-scale restoration projects, and work with communities to manage stormwater, groundwater, species, and
Okay, Ryan, why don't you go ahead and mute the video? Okay, I think if you go ahead and mute the video, I'll probably just try to talk through it. And I apologize. We'll send the commissioners the link for the video, and they can go ahead and watch it at their leisure. So if you just want to kind of watch this like 7 times, so you want to go ahead and just hit play and then mute yourself. I do apologize. I'll do my best here. So basically what they're talking about right now are the different advantageous aspects of each of the different types of agencies that manage water within a larger watershed area. And here's where they're starting to discuss how each of those agencies access funding. Counties obviously have the ability to raise taxes and have ad valorem taxes, as well as receive grants. Watershed districts and watershed management organizations, as permitted, also can do those things as well. SWCDs are able to be funded from ad valorem taxes allocated by the county, but they themselves are not able to raise taxes, but they are able to receive grants. So within those 3 areas, there's 3 different plans: a county water plan, a watershed district WMO plan, and an SWCD plan when they have one. So the purpose of one watershed, one planning effort is to take all 3 of these agencies, different authorities and different watershed management areas, water resource management areas, and combine them and come up with a way to find shared visions and shared goals and optimize those areas where they overlap. It's the purpose of one watershed, one plan planning, right? And the second kind of big idea is going with the flow. And this is hearkening back to following watershed boundaries versus political boundaries. As you can see, these are all the different large major watersheds within the United States, lower 48. This is an example of one of the watershed areas in Minnesota, central Minnesota, and all of the different counties that drain to that watershed area. So if we manage water just based upon the county boundaries, obviously all of these counties drain towards that watershed, but then all of these counties also drain outside of these watersheds. And when you manage watershed management on just the county level, it doesn't take into account that outflow. and the inflow from outside watershed management areas as well. So water doesn't follow political boundaries, and so watershed management at a county level doesn't take into account that inflow and outflow. Whereas when you manage at the watershed level, you're accounting for, there you go, the watershed within that area. So you can see there's all of these different sub-watersheds draining in and out of that planning area. And that's why Bowser and many other agencies promote a one watershed, one plan planning area. And then she says some more really great information. I can't remember what that is. Oh, that's right. She talks about the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment and how Minnesotans voted to tax ourselves to commit funds to improving our lakes, rivers, and wetlands. However, we need to be able to see the outcomes of this. We're not just going to throw money to the wind. We want to see some actual measurable results. So it is how we achieve the ability to fund many of these projects and programs. But there is that expectation for progress. They need to see results. Obviously, we all need to see results. That's why water resource agencies are very resource driven. And so how do we make those choices? The best way to make choices to show those results is by prioritizing, targeting, and measuring, right? You prioritize your resources, you target your resources, and then you measure effectiveness. So it's kind of the core of a lot of what we do. Let's see what this is. So for example, we might target the Cedar Lake watershed, but within that prioritized area, where is the best place to target to improve water resource management? Where is the best place to install BMPs, for example? So again, one watershed, one plan planning is about working together on local issues, going with the flow, meaning going at the watershed level, and then making the best choices to obtain actual results. And again, I apologize. We will send this to you. It is actually a really great little video. They've done 3. I know nothing about these TED Talks, so I can't tell you whether they're good or bad. Anyhow, I am going to go ahead and share my screen because let me know when you can see my screen.
Got it.
Thank you, Melissa. So a couple of key takeaways from the one watershed, one plan planning area. Within the Twin Cities metro area, it is optional whether or not to participate in the one watershed, one plan planning efforts. So why would we? Why would we choose to participate in this activity? Again, one big drive is that the county and the WMO really strongly believe in a unified watershed management. This is a great way to accomplish that. It does not override existing plans for our area. It doesn't override local authorities. It's just a great way to maximize leveraging capacity. So we are considered optional participants. So obviously we could certainly just be a passive attendee on this. However, as a member of the policy committee and as a leader in this, we get to have a say in the focus of where the water resource funding will go for these activities. We help decide and provide input and drive that policy and those priorities, as well as have the ability to obtain then funds leveraged from this. And why do we care about that? Well, for our planning area, it started out as this really kind of larger HUC 8. Since meeting with the group and meeting with the different agency representatives, we've kind of narrowed it down to this blue area. So you can obviously see a reason why we are concerned and we do care is because this is a really large opportunity for the county. But more importantly, it allows funding and it would provide funding for both the Sewer and Rice County. And those are both headwaters of the Sand Creek subwatershed. So up until now, they have not had the ability to get funds through what we usually use as watershed-based implementation funding. They're just not eligible. But through this, they are. This allows us to actually dedicate funds to the upstream area of Sand Creek and some of our other areas. So for us, it's a very, very high priority for the WMO and just generally for the county as a whole. So that's kind of the big reason why it not only allows us to prioritize areas that are of concern to the WMO, but also allows us to leverage funds for our partners that we've been working with to really improve our upstream resources, making it easier on us downstream. So this year, there's a $250,000 to $300,000 planning grant available to help write and implement the plan. After that, there's actually funding each year to help implement the plan. Again, because WMOs and counties within the metro are optional, even after the plan is approved, we're not required to have this plan replace our existing watershed management plan. And I actually would not recommend that we necessarily do that, but we can actually use it as an amendment or an adopted an accessory plan to help us. And again, provide really targeted and directed funds that we help prioritize for our upstream partners. So what staff is asking of the board and the WPC is, I was going to find it in here, for a recommendation and a direction, for participating in the policy group. There's a policy committee and as well as a steering committee and an advisory committee. I did check with Bowser. We are allowed to use the WPC, and I think the WPC is an excellent resource for this for the WMO. The WPC has oversight on the WMO's policy, so kind of a one-for-one there. And it can alleviate a little bit of the resource drain on the board. There's also potentially a steering team. My recommendation would be to allow the Sewer and Rice County to just maintain that steering team. Kind of heavy lifting. They do the kind of the day-to-day work, and then we provide the input. And then the advisory committees are kind of like our tax and our whatever. We'll have those as needed to kind of provide a few recommendations and insight. So at this time, I'm stand for any questions.
So are you looking for staff to serve on the policy committee or WPC members?
It's a very good question, Madam Chair, and I apologize for the need to clarify on that. It is one where it is a member of an appointed committee that must serve on that policy committee. So while staff will be there, I will be there. I'll be your buddy, help you along. Staff is not the one who serves on the policy committee. That must be either a WPC member or a board member.
Okay.
Because you're the ones that officially represent the agency.
Yep.
For that group.
Okay. So I will put in, I would be more than happy to serve on that if you need someone, as long as it's not a conflict of interest. So to refresh the rest of the commissioner's memory, if you don't, I work for Bowser. So I need to make sure that they don't consider it a conflict of interest. I imagine it won't be a problem, but I'll want to double check on that. I would even say it might be nice to be on the steering committee, kind of because I want to see this from the other side. Just, you know, I'll add in, and this program is great. I'm seeing it from the Bowser side. I mean, it really does get the watershed to work together. Every year we're shoveling out, you know, every 2 years, excuse me, they're 2-year grants, are shoveling out millions of dollars across the state to implement projects because of these plans. So having this plan in place is very good because we'll be able to get additional funding to start putting in these projects. So the more input that we can have in this plan, the better. It's all locally driven. So, you know, the state agencies do have some say to provide some guidance on what goes in the plan, but it really is what the local governments want to see done. And as funding is allocated, they look to the plan and they say, is it in your plan? So it's really important to have that good solid plan to start with, so that you can, start picking projects to put in. So there's a lot that goes into the plan, and it really is important. So the other question I had too is, who's doing the plan writing? Are you planning on hiring a consultant for that, or is it going to be done internally?
Again, great question, Madam Chair. At the moment, the group has left that open until we have the policy committee. Right now, it's the staff that are putting together the application for the planning grant. So that is due May, June. I apologize, I just had it off the top of my head of this year. So that's currently being done at the staff level, but I suspect we may simply hire somebody, but not necessarily.
And then sorry, I might have misunderstood. So this is the application to get the grant to plan. So we haven't necessarily been selected to be one of the next watersheds to write the plan.
Correct. There are more applications right now than there are funds, but much like with the vaccine, but in a little quicker timeline, Bowser has said, we do get, we'll get to you, right? But part of what gets you points on the application is resolutions by your boards and commissions that you are going to participate in this, and that you will be a member of the policy or steering or whatever the committee is you're signing up for. And that level of commitment, as well as having an agreed upon planning area. So right now, all of the different agency staff have all agreed on the kind of the planning area. It's a nuance, but not necessarily every agency within that planning area has agreed to participate or wants to participate. So for example, within our planning area, the Lower Minnesota River Watershed District and the Scott Soil Water Conservation District and the SWMO are the ones within Scott County that would be on that policy committee. Those are the ones that have expressed interest.
Okay.
So that's kind of what we're doing right now. We're getting our ducks in a row to submit the application for the planning grant. And
okay. And I don't want to step on anyone else's toes if there's other interest or that either. So I'll open it up, I guess, to questions or comments from the other commissioners.
Chair Weaver, this is Commissioner Pint. First of all, thank you. You are definitely the most qualified, and we appreciate very much you stepping up, taking a leadership position in this. So a couple of points that I'd like to make is, one is definitely, I am also very much in support of the plan and participating. I see lots of positives. So I want to encourage staff to continue. And I'd also be open if you need a motion to recommend that at some point here. And also, Rita, as your backup, if there's anything I can do to be of support to you in any way on this endeavor, I'd be happy to volunteer. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other comments or questions? Otherwise, I think I will open it up for a motion to proceed with a recommendation to participate.
Commissioner Weaver, Chairman Weaver, Commissioner Pint here. I would make a motion to recommend the Watershed Planning Commission highly support the moving forward with the one Watershed One Plan initiative.
Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Shea, I'll second that.
Thank you.
And I'll do roll. Thank you, commissioners. Commissioner Weaver.
Aye.
Commissioner Pint.
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius.
Aye.
Commissioner Shea.
Aye.
Commissioner Veerling.
Aye.
And Commissioner Schmidt.
Madam Chair Vanessa, I was just going to mention, I muted Commissioner Schmidt during the video audio issues, so you might not know he's muted. So I was just going to say, Brian, you might want to take yourself off of mute.
Or can he throw his response into chat? Or I suppose if you're on the phone, you might not have the chat option. Okay. How do we proceed, Vanessa, if we can't have a response from him?
Ryan, can you unmute him?
Madam Chair, Vanessa, I can only ask to unmute, and I did that, but it doesn't actually allow me to unmute somebody. There, Brian.
Looks like he's back. It does.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it'll, all of a sudden it says you can star 6 to unmute, but I don't know if that means I am unmuted or what the situation is. I'm unmuted now, yes?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
So Commissioner Schmidt, what would your vote be?
Aye.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, so our motion is passed. Thank you.
So I will take that to the board and I'll let the board know that Commissioner Weaver has offered to take on that policy position. And then the board can recommend her or appoint her to that if they so choose. That being said, we have discussed at the committee meetings to also have a backup. So it is very likely, Commissioner Pint, that we might have you be the backup and have you attend the first couple meetings as well for the planning area, just to kind of get your feet wet and get up to speed. Initially, right now, we're kind of talking about maybe a monthly meeting as it would get going once we received the grant. But, you know, eventually that would actually wane down. That's our understanding anyway. So thank you, commissioners.
Okay, I think we can move on. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Chair Weaver, please. Commissioner Pint, one last question. Vanessa, the 2-page memo that we discussed today, I don't think that was in our packet. Is that possible you could send that out to us?
Absolutely, Commissioner Pint. And yes, I apologize. It was something we got last minute, just kind of after the packet went out. So I apologize. Yes, I will send that this evening as well as the details.
Great, thank you.
And Commissioner Wolf did mention that, yes, it is at the chambers. So that's good. And I will get additional details as well. So thank you all. Yes.
It'll also be online too.
Oh,
So-
thank you, Commissioner Wolf. Appreciate
All right.
that.
Yep.
So I will get that link out to everybody as well.
Thank you. Okay, with that, then do we have a motion to adjourn?
This is Commissioner Shea, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Casilius. I'll second.
Thank you.
And I'll do that. I apologize. Commissioner Weaver,
Aye.
Commissioner Pint,
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius,
Aye.
Commissioner Shea,
Aye.
Commissioner Veerling,
Aye.
and Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
All right, the motion is passed. We'll plan to see everybody in a month.
Yes, thank
Thanks
you
so
all
much.
very much for your time and patience and consideration.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Great
All right.
night.
Good night.
Vanessa, could I grab you 1 minute for a question?
Oh, yeah.
Should I hit the recording? Do I do the pause or the stop? I'm trying to remember.
You could stop.
Okay, got it. All right.
You can